today will be corruption and the Global Magnitsky Act. Uh, Today, I have in the studio with me two bright minds to help, look at two very aspect of the Global Magnitsky Act and also the corruption aspect. For those of you who are not aware, I think the corruption report was just released by the OFAC. We call it OFAC, right? By the U.S. OFAC, um, which actually listed an individual. I think I'm okay to say his name, Senator Prince Johnson, on there as one of the people that was highlighted in Liberia. Um, so we want to talk about the Global Magnitsky Act, corruption, and and also talk about the details of the report itself. But first thing we want to do first, we will talk about the act itself, how it came about, initially what it intended to do, and what is actually morphing uh, into as a law that is now becoming a global law that is, what I call it, the drag net in terms of corruption and financial crimes enforcement, and also corruption and also human rights as well. So today, that's what we're going to be talking about. Welcome to the show. It is 3 o'clock every Saturday. First thing I would like to apologize for last Saturday. We took time off. Technically, it wasn't a time off. I think it was a miscommunication into our planning schedule. So, we'd like to apologize to you on that. But, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Focus on Liberia. That is going to be our topic today, and I am honored to have two guests in the studio with me today. Alex, would you mind introducing yourself, and then I will give Colonel Jewa at the time to introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you for the intro, and like to say hello to everybody in listening land. Those who are listening and those who are commenting, those who are participating on this show. Please share the show. As Gabriel said, we're here 3 p.m. Eastern time and 2 p.m. Central time, my time, and that I think that will be around 7 o'clock p.m. in Liberia and other times around the world. So welcome. Thank you for your participation in the show. Today you can see have a title. Now I call myself the former head of the FIU of Liberia. The FIU is the Financial Intelligence Unit of Liberia. It is the equivalent of the what we call the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN,
Vincent. All right.
in the United States of America. It's an institution that oversee financial crimes, money laundering, and all the related crimes to that. So, Liberia Financial Intelligence Unit, they have this kind of organization in every part of the world, in almost every part of the world. And they can take different form. They can take the administrative form. That means it stands alone, like what we have mostly in Africa and most third world. In the U.S., it's part of the United States Treasury, which is like the finance ministry of the United States.
Yep.
But it has powers. The Minister of Finance, the Secretary of State of Finance of the Treasury, literally does not have sort of absolute control over the head of the fencing. They have
Yep.
powers. All right, and so that's what they intend to achieve in Africa and other parts of the world by making it the administrative one stand alone by its own law, so that it makes it powerful as well. So once again, this is Alex Coffey, former head of the FIU of Liberia. I give this title because of the conversation we're about to have,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because fencing plays a great role in implementing the Magnitsky Act.
Yep.
So Liberia Financial Intelligence Unit plays some role in this respect as well. That is
Yep.
why I decided to bring my title today. But I ain't like title business.
Brilliant. No, thank you. Thank
I
you. I think
normally
that
don't
was
like
a
title business.
yeah, I think that was a great introduction. Usually when we come out here, we don't, what I think we introduce ourselves. We don't talk about our title or what we do. But I think in this specific case, is it's okay to talk about your title because I think it's very important about the discussion we're going to have today. Um, Counselor Joed, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Welcome to Focus on Liberia. I think this is my first time interacting with you via social media or any shape or form. But again, thank you for taking the time to join us. Would you mind introducing yourself for our audience? Maybe give a little bit of background on what you do for our audience, and then we would dive into the show.
Thank you for inviting me, and hello to all Liberians and
Yeah.
people who may be following the show. My name is Frederick A.B. Jower. I'm a Liberian lawyer. I live both in Liberia and the United States. I live in Colorado. Have a law office in Liberia that I go in and out. I'm also in Nigeria for a good while. I go before the Across Community Court of Justice, representing the interests of clients.
Yeah.
I have 30 years of active practice of law. In Colorado, I run a refugee agency called Center for Immigrants. We assist refugees and immigrants who come to the United States from the day of their arrival to the day they become citizens. We help them from start to finish. I also recently established what I call an employable and sustainable wages agency, principally to have refugees and immigrants who come to the United States, particularly in Colorado, who may need to have employment, not just the $11, the $10, the $15, something that is considered sustainable and livable. That agency was established in January this year. As I said, I'm a Liberian. I have great interest in human rights. Have been practicing both as a legal counsel and human rights lawyer, both in before the Across Community Court in Liberia, at the AU, sometimes in Gambia. I hope to go to Gambia with the hope of representing people as it comes to the interest. I'm interested in how our government is run. I'm also interested in how our budgets are written, and how appropriations are made,
Yeah.
and who gets what.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. I think those are. Sorry, maybe I caught you off there. Continue
No, I'm
if I.
fine. I was done.
Okay. All right. No, thank you. I think that was a great introduction as well. Again, as I said earlier, nice to meet you and welcome to Focus on Liberia. On Focus on Liberia, this the marketplace here where we talk everything finance, economics, and business, and everything else in between. So again, thanks for joining us. Again, without further ado, let's jump into what we're here to talk about today, which is corruption and the Magnitsky Act. Corruption and the Magnitsky Act. Corruption and the Magnitsky Act. So corruption, as you and everybody know, it's something that not just plague Liberia itself, but is actually a global disease and something that every country struggle with. In some advanced country, we've gone to, we gone we gave it some fancy name by lobbying, right? We make it fancy just to reduce it, but it exists regardless of how you label it. We just got to try to ameliorate the effects of it, right? Um, but that's one of our topic today. The other one is the Magnitsky Act, right? So the Magnitsky Act was actually an act that was passed into law in 2012 by, I think, President Barack Obama, right? It was pretty much a retaliation for the human rights abuses that was suffered by a Russian tax lawyer who ended up dying in jail named Sergei Magnitsky, right? And initially, that was the intended purpose, but it has gone on to morph into, corruption, gone into what we call anti-money laundering. Is even gone extensively into like global human right now, that it has become like what I call this drag net uh, of monitoring that talks about uh, human right abuses, anti-money laundering. So technically, that's what the Magnitsky Act is. And as we I think you and I are aware. The OFAC just put out a report, I think a few weeks, probably a month ago, that listed a specific individual in Liberia as being one of the people on that list. So those are some of the things we want to talk about today. We want to look at corruption, how it ties into the Magnitsky Act, and the effect and implication on Liberia, and maybe look at it from a global standpoint as well. And I think both of you have a greater extent of knowledge and experience to be able to shed lights on that. I know my colleague here, Alex, as he introduced himself earlier, working in the FIU, which is a financial intelligence unit that looks at anti-money laundering and crime enforcement. So, Alex, I would like to maybe throw some question at you today. Both of you are going to be in the hot seat, the ringer. I'm going to put you guys through the ringer, so I hope you guys came ready. So I would like to refer this to you. Can you tell us about what, first of all, what do you think the implication is, or the implications are, about the OFAC report that came out that listed Senator Prince Johnson on it? Just give us a baseline of the implications.
Well, it has different implications. So if you know that the U.S. United States of America use these, they declare as a national emergency.
Yeah.
All right. Serious human rights abuse and corruption around the world, that it constitutes as unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So there are three things there: national security threat,
mm-hmm.
the foreign policy threat, the economic threat,
yep.
right? So the U.S. government has determined that these things, serious human right abuse and corruption,
mm-hmm.
are threat to their very existence, right? If, for example, on the economic side, if the U.S. provides foreign assistance,
yeah,
right, to any country, and that foreign assistance is being abused through corruption,
yeah,
they could use the Magnitsky Act to go after you.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I know Councillor Jewel can talk a lot about this part on the human rights and the legal aspect.
Yeah.
But if you are engaged
right. on
the corruption side into serious pilfering of your own country resources,
mm-hmm.
all right, which invariably has a threat to the U.S. National security interest or their economic interest,
right,
they could go after you. Now, the implication there is that when they issue these sanctions on you, they can go as far as freezing if you have assets
in the U.S.
within the bailiwick of the United States of America.
Yeah.
They could freeze assets, right? So, for example, what happened to Councillor Sherman, right? I am not sure that Mr. Johnson, Prince Johnson, has assets in the United States of America.
Yeah.
Right? But to the extent that
he did.
they can cooperate through legal mutual assistance with Liberia or other countries
to freeze his assets,
they could also freeze your assets.
Yeah.
Now, countries also have what we call targeted financial sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
Under the Magnitsky Act or under their own legal jurisprudence through the Financial Intelligence Unit laws or through the country's own legal system, mm-hmm. that those countries can cooperate with the United States to use their own law. So it has that financial implication.
Yeah.
Now, if the OFAC, the Office of Foreign Asset Control of the U.S. Treasury,
right,
issue this list, The anti-money laundering laws around the world, which countries have incorporated and made legal in their legal system, countries, banks, for example, banks are required through the Financial Action Force, Task Force recommendation to implement those. So if your name shows on a OFAC list, for example, there are certain things you cannot do with banks.
Yep.
All right. Banks can post what we call post no debit, right? Or they could highlight and they could report your financial accounts to the Financial Intelligence Unit.
Yep.
And the Financial Intelligence Unit can begin an investigation. So even if you have money in Liberia, if you have bank account in Ghana, if you have bank account anywhere else, it has an implication on the ability to utilize your bank account.
Yep.
So it's like you're being on the United Nations sanction list. Banks will flag your account and treat it differently.
Yeah.
And may report you to your country financial system.
Perfect. Yeah.
It has a security implication.
Yeah.
It has political implication. All right.
Yeah.
So.
All right. No, thank you. That was a great background there. I think you look at it more from the financial aspect of it. So I want to bring in Councilor Jawad to talk about the human rights. So if one of I think the basis of the Magnitsky Act itself, it started as a human right law, right? If you looked at, because Sergei Magnitsky was actually killed in prison when he actually exposed this $230 million fraud into the Russian businesses, and they in turn indicted him to say he was guilty of fraud. So they arrested him and put him in jail, and mysteriously they ended up killing him in jail. That's how he died, right? So the Magnitsky Act was actually passed as a punishment and a counter attack on the Russian government because of that. So it initially started as a human right protection law. So given the lot of human rights abuses we have in Liberia, and I think during your introduction you talk about, without even trying to get too deep into that, you talk about you have interest because you want to know how the budget is passed. I will let you to talk to us about the human right aspect of of this law, or as it relate from a global standpoint, or also you can boil it down to Liberia as well. How do you think this law actually affects Liberia or Liberians as a whole?
After the announcement was made, I overheard Mr. Senator Johnson, Prince Johnson.
Yes.
I guess he was on one or two shows and was saying that, I don't have anything in America. I don't have a house there. I don't have money there.
Mm-hmm.
I've never gone there since the war ended. And so this is a fiasco. I don't know how would the Magnitsky Act impact me. Why need me when you can't do anything with me? But that's a way to speak if you have little or no idea what the act is all about.
Right.
As Mr. Coffey said, the banks in Liberia and in Africa do not operate as an island.
Yes.
They must operate consistent with international law.
Mm-hmm.
They must operate looking at money laundering as a national and international crime.
Mm-hmm.
They must operate in raising red flag at certain accounts.
Yeah.
And how much is placed in there, how the money go in, how it comes out, and so forth.
Yeah.
And so it is being naive to believe that the act doesn't really have much impact on anyone who is named. I know two persons have been named in Liberia. Councilor Vani Sherman was the first person named. I don't know, but at this point, I understand the Sherman and Sherman Law Office is closed. And they are dividing themselves into bits and pieces. Lawyers are going and opening their own law offices. But Mr. Johnson has a very notorious record of how he performed during the war, how there were undefined slaveries of women for sex purposes.
Yes.
And also how people were interviewed by him and placed on firing squad right before the eyes of many people who were very fearful of their own lives. Mr. Johnson is known to have been or to be involved as a massive killer.
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson had a record of not respecting the law, but beyond that, the pronouncement, the sanction of Mr. Johnson names specific things that he's involved. It is alleged that in multiple elections,
yes,
Mr. Johnson sold votes.
Yeah.
He said he did not sell any vote. That's what he said. But he negotiated in ensuring that starting from the Salif government onto the current WIA government, Mr. Johnson is seen as a king of politics in Liberia.
Yeah.
Whether it violated human rights or not, his attitude and his action continue to reflect that he's a significantly corrupt person.
Yeah.
Money went to Mr. Johnson is said to have been advising the government of Liberia on how to maintain national peace and security, domestic peace. Mr. Johnson is allegedly getting money out of the intelligence agency. I would name perhaps the NSA.
Yeah.
To be one of the institutions where Mr. Johnson may have been working and getting money from. Mr. Johnson is in his sale of vote. Government may have negotiated, Ellen Johnson said the government may have negotiated with him to ensure that Nima County is solid.
Yeah.
If you follow the politics in Liberia, you find that nearly everyone wants to have Mr. Johnson on his side.
Yeah.
When he once said that I would support Oman Joseph Boakai, the ruling party, Mr. Weah and other people were shaking. But these actions of Mr. Johnson, in comparison to the act, you find that the U.S. say that his act is an act that violates the U.S. national emergency. In other words, it's security.
Yeah.
How is the U.S. security impacted? Because of how pervasive the act of Mr. Prince Johnson will be, it goes into money that Liberia gets from the United States to help to support its budget.
Yeah.
If such money is passed from the regular legal forum and then gets back to Mr. Johnson for being part of what they call maintaining the peace and security.
Right.
It violates human rights in that people who the right to survive as a human being in Liberia is threatened.
Yeah.
It violates human rights in that where budget appropriation should be made for the development of Liberia is also threatened. It violates international law in that Johnson will use his money for anything he wishes to use it for.
Yeah.
And it goes to the part of even restricting him from traveling, even though he doesn't intend to travel here. But the banks in Liberia will have to take what lawyers refer to as judicial notice. There were institutions that are named. Those institutions are supporting the act of Mr. Johnson in violating the human rights of people. Yeah. Liberians, I was in Liberia during the COVID. I went to Liberia January in 2020. And I was caught up there up to until July 13, 2020. If you see Liberians, and for me, having spent almost 21 years in the United States for going back to visit, even though I got law office there and I in and out when the time would allow, I saw people actually struggling to live.
Yeah.
The idea that Liberians, women and children are selling in the street water for them to be able to assist themselves. Some people selling cucumbers. Some people selling bitter cola.
Yeah.
You find things that is highly degrading. So the economic interest of Liberia, when it's violated, it also impacts the human rights of the national development of the country.
Yeah. No, thank you. That is a great. I think that is a great narrative there in terms of looking at that from a human rights standpoint. Because usually when you look at this act, you want to piece it together to say, okay, how does that tie into human right? They just put somebody's name out who's involved in this corruption of politics to play, getting money to tell the Liberian government to say, hey, I can offer you security information. In reality, he's not really giving them anything. So when you look at it, you say, how does that tie into corruption? But I think you shed a great light into tying that into, how, it ties into the human right. There's one thing there's a question I want to follow with both of you. And then given that technically what this means is an indictment, not just on Prince Johnson himself, but the country as a whole and the government as a whole. So technically we've been caught with our pants down, right? What do you guys think I think you alluded to some of that, but I want both of you guys to expand on that. What do you guys think should be the next reactionary step that either the government of Liberia or the financial institutions should take right now to make sure that, hey, we rectify this thing, or it doesn't happen again? I'll give you a backdrop of that, right? So Isabel dos Santos, she's the president's daughter of Angola, right? The same thing happened to her. This is a lady businesswoman who was funneling government money into her businesses and playing with some of the major banks in the world right now, right? Some of them, when they found that out, they cut business tie with her. They didn't have to wait for, the Mauritius cable to come out for them to find out. When they found out, through what we call know your customer, they cut ties with her. So what she did, she ended up forming her own bank and buying another one in Portugal, right, to get access into the European market, right? What Angola did, they work with the corruption unit and they end up sanctioning her. Right now, you hear nothing about her, right? So that was reactionary step that Angola took to rectify that situation. So my question to both of you is, we've been caught with our pants down because we can blame this thing on Prince Johnson himself, but if you look at it, it's a transaction between him and the government, right? What do you guys think this current administration and the banking institutions that are involved in this thing can do to at least mitigate some of the damages that were already done?
Well, let me just start. The last time on this show, there was a question of whether Dennis was the one who raised the question. He said that he thought the sanction on Prince Johnson was going after the fruit that was so low that it didn't really have any
low-hanging fruit, right?
Yeah, low-hanging fruit, but may not have had that much impact. But the announcement of sanctioning Mr. Johnson is, as you rightly said, not just against Mr. Johnson alone.
Yep.
It's against the Republic of Liberia.
Thank you. Yeah.
It draws the attention of the Republic of Liberia of how reckless it is. So what is it that the current government can do? There were ministries not named but referenced. There were institutions not named but referenced. The government of Liberia, through the Ministry of Justice, can begin now to investigate the allegation or the foundation of the sanction. Investigate whether the folks at NSA is involved in placing Mr. Johnson, they call it security information.
Yeah.
Placing Mr. Johnson on their payroll.
Yeah.
For him to somehow tell them whether a coup is about to happen or whether a group of people are about to attack Liberia. The Liberian government needs to investigate that.
Yeah.
Through the Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice also need to, through the government of Liberia, should also be able to empower the Ministry of Justice to be able to find out whether at the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Johnson is on any kind of payroll outside of being a senator. Those that are connected, those who were referenced, the government can begin to establish, if it feels very uncomfortable, establish an independent body, independent council to be able to
I think
investigate
that
these
should
things.
be, yeah.
Because I know what it is politically. Politics is so much cover everything in our country that the Minister of Justice is as powerless as you can ever think. Unless the president say move, he would not move.
Yeah.
I remember when former Justice Wright, Marco Wright, was Solicitor General at the Ministry of Justice. Mr. Selly informed him that before you indict people, bring the list of those people you want to indict to the mansion or to me.
Shouldn't, right? That is.
Mr. Councillor Wright mentioned that. So naming Prince Johnson, it should not be anything new, because Liberian government, we have good laws. The problem we got in our country is that we selectively indict, we selectively prosecute, we selectively sentence people. The law is not evenly spread.
Yeah.
So if the government should wanting to correct this, it should go ahead to begin to find out whether there's reason to indict people who were mentioned. Yes. Whether there's reason to indict institutions that participated in a play or pay for play or play for pay. Yeah. And once the international community starts to see those the positive actions consistent with our laws, then they will rather think that, hey, this country is serious.
Yeah.
But this is a challenge for the national development. This is a challenge for the legal system of Liberia. It also is a challenge to the judiciary. How do we prosecute cases that appear before the courts?
Yeah.
Are we selective? I tell you one thing, when Richard Talbot, Eugene Shannon, Consolvani Sherman, Alex Tyler, former speaker Alex Tyler, a group of them were indicted for economic sabotage during the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf time. The case dragged on to Mr. Weah taking over, and Councillor Musa Dean, who is a very good friend of Councillor Vani Sherman, was then made Minister of Justice. Guess what they did? They rewrote the indictment to water it down so that at the end of the day, the evidence will appear insufficient.
Yeah.
And that the jury will return a verdict of not guilty. All of those people walked.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you. That is Alex, I know this is, I want you to maybe shed light on it from the implication of, the financial institution in the country, from maybe FIUs, because as you're aware, there were some financial institutions that were implicated in that, right? What do you think they can do? How do you to in terms of going about whether they may cut ties with this guide, or maybe do their own investigation to really find out about the crux of this this report. Can you shed light on it from a financial standpoint, a regulatory standpoint? Because I know that is something you've done in your past.
So like I said, within the context of when you show up on OFAC list, and again, OFAC is the Office of Financial Assets Control of the United States Treasury. The same way the FinCEN, the National Action Enforcement Network, which is the equivalent of the FIU in Liberia in America,
right?
It's a unit of the U.S. Treasury as well.
Correct.
They are empowered to enforce the Magnistky Act. So, for example, the FinCEN, again, is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Yeah. You could call it the FIU of the United States, right? They issue what we call advisory, right? That advisory is for the implementation of the Magnitsky Act,
Mhm.
advisory on human rights abuses enabled by corrupt senior foreign political figures, and they are what? They are facilitators.
Right.
So you talk more in the context of the other institution that facilitated these things, right? But on this grand scheme of things, we got something called risk assessment.
Mhm.
We have risk, RBA, the risk-based approach. So this is within the context of grave emergency on the U.S. security, politics, and economy. So the U.S. determine at a particular point in time what has more risk. So the targeted sanction is against for a start. For example, in the case of the recent targeting of Prince Johnson. So to them, they believe that Prince Johnson poses the greatest risk,
Democracy. Right.
right?
Yeah.
To their interest. So therefore, they must bring sanction against Prince Johnson. The other fruits are there.
Mhm.
Who knows? They might bring sanction against them later on. They might bring sanction against them in 4 years, in 2 years, in 3 years, in 6 months. I don't know. But they're taking the greatest risk, right? So they're going
Right.
after the greatest risk for now. Now, that means countries around the world, once your name come on that list, financial institutions around the world treat your financial dealings differently, to the extent that your asset may be frozen
Mhm.
if you have some in the United States or
Yeah.
in other country, right? So in Liberia, banks have also placed this sanctionable target sanction on their list, which is a high risk.
Mhm.
All right, and it's all around the world. It's not just in Liberia alone. This information has gone all around the world, and banks, financial institutions around the world will restrict their transaction with you to the extent that some of them will freeze your assets depending on your bank account, depending on their law.
Yeah.
Right? To the extent that the head of the FIU could pick up a phone and authorize banks and use the law, a prevailing law in Liberia, to bring a case, a freezing order, which have to have hearing, right? But in the interim, within 7 days, before a hearing is held, the FIU head can pick up the phone and freeze this asset because it's on the list. But
Yeah.
the banks, by way of international anti-money system and the laws of Liberia, can the minimum they can do is to do the POD, post no debit. You can't withdraw from the account. You can only put money in there. That's the minimum.
Right.
But that account, those assets within every bank, whether it's insurance company, whether it's banks, anything that is financial institution in nature, they have placed some restriction on your assets already. Right. There's also, besides the targeted financial sanction, there's also what we call the politically exposed person.
Yeah.
Not just is a politically exposed person, and there's a law in Liberia on politically exposed person.
There's a law in the United States as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the PEPs.
Yeah.
Right? Now, their laws it come on the fact that, and there's a list of positions, not individuals, but list of positions from the legislature, all elected positions, to the executive, all appointed positions, to the judiciary, and to the military, and their associates, meaning spouses, children, and in some countries, to your driver and your cook can become an associate can become a PEP, a high-risk person. The reason is politically exposed person, because they occupied a public position, they have the ability to use government asset to their personal gain.
Yep.
And they have the ability to make things happen. So there are laws in Liberia. What we are talking now, for example, the laws of Liberia, we're talking about these individuals placed on the internal sanction list already, and begin cooperation with the U.S. through the mechanism of the Financial Action Task Force to what we call cooperation, through international cooperation, sharing of information. They begin a process already.
So here's a question to you. Since I know you worked in the FIU unit in Liberia, which I think it looks at the bigger financial institution of Liberia. Now, I think some of you may have either you or Councillor Joe may have talked about Vonnie Sherman being on the list before. Do banks in Liberia run what we call OFAC checked with anybody that go open the account? Because I know we do that here. That is part of what we call Bank Secrecy Act. So anytime you go in to open an account, right, whether you want to, if you want to get a loan, right, let's say you want to get a loan for your business, we run what we call the OFAC, right? They will run what we call OFAC check. It run you through that entire OFAC database that we just put out. There's a database. If your name appears on that means they don't do business with you. Do we have such thing in Liberia that can at least in a way allow these financial institutions to
yes, Gabriel, yes,
get at the
yes.
very beginning before they even get to this point?
Yes, Gabriel, yes. Liberia is not an island. Liberia is a member of the Committee of Nations. Liberia goes to all these different conferences. Liberia has the legal system on anti-money laundering. And every financial institution does what we call KYC, know your customer onboarding. Every financial institution, in this case, every bank, even insurance company, money changing, if they have the Forex Bureau,
Right.
We don't have it too much in Liberia. They have a few of them. I mean, a couple of them, but we don't. But let's stick to the banks, right? In this case, every bank does KYC onboarding. They have computer systems that do those things. Just fill out the form. They put it in the form. They have it. They do OFAC listing. They do well check.
Right.
They check. They do screening. Customer screening. It's in our law. It's in the financial intelligence law.
I will hope.
It's in. Don't hope. I'm telling you.
Okay.
Don't hope. I'm telling you. We have the two laws in Liberia, right? That has these things in it. Okay. These laws required any financial institution to do KYC, proper onboarding, to do customer screening for targeted financial sanction, for OFAC. In fact, our banks in Liberia, to their credit, they are good at OFAC screening. Okay. They are good at well-check screening. They have some of the bigger banks, they have good system to do this check, and they regularly report to the FIU. So we have these things, but sometimes the overall willpower to act, to get to the point. That's why I say corruption. Yes, you can have the institution. We'll always pass the corruption check because we have the institution, because we have audit, we are conducting some investigation. But do they end up in the court in prosecution?
Right.
And if they are prosecuted, are people found guilty? And if they are found guilty, are asset frozen?
Right.
Or are asset confiscated? And we have law for it.
And that segue into my
they call it a provisional remedies law.
right.
Right? They have law for it to confiscate asset back to the state.
Right.
If you're found guilty and your asset were part of that process, that whole corruption or money laundering aspect, once that asset is proceeds is the result of the proceeds of crime, that asset is confiscated back to the state.
Okay. So that's
but we have these things happening to the end game. Right now, we have, for example, the Financial Intelligence Act, the Revised Act, which we call the FIA Act, which I started before I left. We have the money laundering, the terrorist financing, the provision of revenue, and the proceeds of crime are combined, which the IMF has reviewed, the World Bank has reviewed, the African Development Bank has reviewed. But every time the people come, they say move one step, we move one step, then they give us some money. They say condition precedent for them to give us budget support, then we move one needle. Then we stop there. Next year they come, they say in order for you to get this budget support, you got to move it to the next level. But have we passed those laws yet? I don't know.
That is my biggest. That segue into my next question here for both of you, and it's one thing I realized about Liberia. It's not that we don't have the laws on the books; it's just we don't implement it, right? We've talked about Vonnie Sherman being indicted on those the OFAC before. The question becomes, what had become of him? Did the government, the Republic of Liberia, investigated? Did they take some of his assets? And that could set the precedent to what happens to Imprint Johnson's case. Now, if they had done something with his case, in Vonnie Sherman's case, where they said, "Hey, this guy was engaged in corruption here," and the government went after him, they investigated him, and they found him guilty. They froze some of his assets and took it away. They could have taken that same reactionary act to say, "Hey, we've done this before. We have a playbook that we can use to go after this guy, even though he's in the government." It goes back to the basis of having which I think Councillor Jewa talked about, of having the court enforce law that hold people accountable. Do you guys think something is going to become of this case, this report that came out? So where Prince Johnson was on the list. Do you, in as much that he doesn't have assets in the United States, that is okay, we understand that. But do you think the government would do something in terms of looking at trying, as you said, the NSA, looking at the NSA report to see if he's actually on the payroll, right? To see where that money came from, whether it is true, and now using that as a legal case to go after this guy and be able to freeze his asset to, however much he was being paid to play, to take that money and turn it over back to the government of Liberia to actually give the judiciary system the autonomy to carry out that report. Do you guys think something is going to become of this?
Gabriel, do you think, your end question, do you think something will come out of this? That is something that we cannot state, we cannot determine, we can only discuss what is available in Liberia. Within the context of what is available in Liberia, we have the laws, we have the institutions to answer your questions. Yes. But whether it will be done is another aspect. That brings me to Marcus Julie Weir's question on your link here. If you're looking at your link, there's a question.
Yeah.
How do you follow up with Marcus Julie Weir writes, how do you follow up with politicians who, after stealing those monies, then gave to friends to invest on their behalf? Now, that's a great question.
You can trace it.
Yeah, so it comes to under the same Magnistky Act or under the Anti-Money Laundering and Corruption Act that we even have in Liberia. They have red flags, right? So how do these politicians, right, and their facilitators access the financial system, say for example, in all countries, for example, in this case in Liberia, through the misappropriation of assets? through what we call the use of shell companies. I wrote an article, a big article on the use of shell companies in Liberia, right? Share companies are companies that just register. Yes, it can be illegal, but share companies are companies that just register for the processing of these kind of, transaction, corruptible transaction, or used for money laundering. While it is true that share companies can be used for legal purposes,
Right.
but share companies can also be used for shifting. Also, there's corruption in the real estate sector. When you see all these people building all these,
It's the biggest
all these big
money laundering.
estate, they are laundering their money because these monies they may not be able to put them on the they may not be able to place them
in the bank.
The money laundering have the placement, the layering, and something. So they may not be able to place the money, so it can be traceable. They push that money into real estate.
Right.
To answer this guy's question, one of the red flags is use of third parties when it appears to shield the identity of the PEP. So, for example, we have a case of one of these managing director of one of these parastatals of this state-owned enterprise in Liberia, where company was registered in the brother's name.
Right.
Right? Where companies was registered in the brother's name, and contract was given. Okay? So these are some of the way they funnel the money. But these things are traceable. And the FIU, the Financial Intelligence Unit of Liberia, is a powerful institution.
Could be a powerful institution.
It is a powerful institution. Yes, I agree with you. Could be a powerful institution.
It could be, because what he's trying to allude to is that there hasn't been any, I think you mentioned that there hasn't been anybody brought to, like, you guys have investigated somebody to say, hey, this person, you can't tell me we're just a clean slate country where nobody's engaging in these things. That's the reason why he said it could be. It could be, meaning you have the ability, you have the power, but you have also the ability to be able to effectively persecute these people. If somebody is found guilty or something, you persecute them. I think that's what he's alluding to. I want to give maybe Colonel Jawe, the Councilor Jawe, the ability.
When did I join the AFL?
I keep calling you Colonel. Councilor Jawe, can you talk to us about what do you think? I think I may have asked this question, but maybe there's something answer that I'm looking for.
But before before Councilor Jawa comes, maybe he can take this question from Emmanuel Tier. And
is that on the comments?
Before he comes into, I'd like to say one of our big brothers, Edward Doe, he passed away a few days ago. He was an active member of the participant of the Focus on Liberia. I think he has come on some of the shows. He regularly contribute. He's my big brother from Nikutan as well. He was my big brother from Nikutan. Thanks to Emmanuel Jackson for raising this issue. We probably will observe a second of silence in sympathy with the family. Augustine, though his brother, is my own good friend. I show up on the crew program, and Edward Doe was a big brother to all of us. So he was a scholar. He was a academic giant in Liberia before he left. He left the Liberia in 1980. He came to the States. He went back for some visit, but he's been here, and he recently passed for what is believed to be from cancer. So a moment of silence, just a second. Thank you. So we can proceed.
Okay. You said you had a question for...
Yeah, I had... the guy said, do you know that... Emmanuel Tier said that, do you know that Prince Johnson deal with former President Salif, not only this government? So maybe I'll leave it with Joe to answer.
Counselor, I think that is...
Let me give a...
He alluded to that. You can give him credit. He alluded to that.
Let me give a caveat here. In as much as I'm a former head of the FIU, I'm still in the field of anti-money laundering investigation. So there are some things I can't speak to specific things. I can only talk about policy issue and things like that. So bear with me when I'm a little restricted, because I'm still under confidentiality clauses and all that stuff.
Yep.
By way of a professional organization and the organization I work with. That was when we count this station, we don't give our titles, right?
Yep.
Only today I gave my former head of.
You put yourself out there. That's on you. Counselor, please. I think that is a great question. I don't know. I think that was a question or statement. And I pondered that question too. This is not the first time. This was something that's happened in the previous administration. The question that I've had, I don't want to tag on too much, was that why is this coming out now? Why now? Why are they telling us now? And why only single this guy out when there's so many people out there in that drag net within this government that was cast out there? But you can, maybe you're restricted as well, but you can just cast a light onto the statement or question that the guest asked, that hey, Prince Johnson's been doing this pay to play in the previous administration. So can you shed a little bit of light on that he want us to hold not just this administration but also the previous administration feet to the fire as well, by they could be guilty as of this as well.
The announcement that Mr. Johnson is sanctioned went as far back as to saying his involvement in multiple elections, selling of votes. So Mr. Sally's government is also involved.
Right.
And it would be unfair to think that it is just Mr. Weir government that Mr. Johnson is pretending or has pretended to provide intelligence reports to, and it might be on payroll. And it will also be unfair to think that Mr. Johnson is on payroll allegedly with the Ministry of National Defense for helping to contain domestic peace and security. But what is interesting, and I say could be, is that Liberia has very good institutions. Liberia has good laws. The Anti-Corruption Commission is one of those areas that could be effective. The financial institution that Mr. Crawford just talked about could also be effective. Why am I saying could be effective? I'm saying could be effective because everything in Liberia is controlled mostly by the executive branch of government. When the government wants to indict, I'm sure you are familiar with the recent indictment of the National Election Commission chair, David Etta Brown, for allegedly laundering money, giving contract to her brothers, to supply the National Election Commission machines that they used in the past by elections. And so quickly, what I saw was the LACC executive director getting on board and conducting investigation and calling Miss David Etta Brown. It doesn't mean Miss David Etta Brown might not have done what
she was alleged to do. Right.
But interestingly, the Deputy Minister of Finance, Wolokoli was on Spoon Talk, and he alluded to having companies. And those companies, in some cases, he said that they were doing business with Liberian government. Is that money laundering or is different? It is money laundering. For someone to get the Deputy Minister of Finance is having companies out there that he admits to publicly, and almost saying, I don't care. But these institutions are not functional. Reason is because the executive branch of government, preferably the president, and not just president, presidents in Liberia have been involved with deciding who gets to be prosecuted.
Right.
And unless the international community say, we gave you $100 million, do this, the government of Liberia does not move. The sanction of Mr. Johnson maybe would just be a public notice that politicians stay away from him for a while, publicly. But these institutions, because they are so suppressed by the executive branch of government, they find it very difficult if you want to keep your job as a minister of justice. And I don't know why, because a good lawyer will not want to sit at the minister of justice for being just minister. You can practice law, you can make money.
Thank you.
So you don't really need to bother with it. And let me add, the minister of justice is the only ministry in the government of Liberia that can say to the president, this is not legal.
Thank you.
And we cannot follow this. Mr. President, this is what the law says, and this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
But everyone is waiting for whether the president will speak or not. And he could speak impliedly by saying nothing. He could speak by doing a meeting, say to the Minister of Justice, this is not important. But let me add, this act impact every Liberian. Whether or not you were Prince Johnson or not, this act impact us. How? Because when you try to transfer money from the United States to Liberia, it will be washed.
Yeah. Thank you.
People when you try to build, I have my office in Liberia. I send money a lot by Western Union to pay the staff, to get on board a group of lawyers to handle matters I've got. At some point, it will ask, why do you send this amount of money?
Mm-hmm.
So ordinary people who might not even be involved, may not be significantly corrupt, will also be impacted.
Yeah.
What to do is for the government to get up from its hand, stand up, investigate, find out who are those involved, indict them, and prosecute them. You know, the Solicitor General is my friend, and he said to me one time that the Weah government was about to prosecute and recover Liberian assets. And I said, are you sure? He said, oh yeah, Councilor, we want you to help. So I said, how can I help? What can I do? But then he was quick to add a caveat that this is appearing to be political. Where is that institution now? Have any Liberian, both at home and here, heard anything about it? No. So all of these institutions, with all of the support that they have, with all of the authority that they should have, those authorities are meaningless if the president will step on them.
No.
And so Liberia is what it is today. The other question I asked the other day was that, do we need to wait for the United States to say one person is sanctioned, then everybody is freaking out or rejoicing or claiming that, oh, we are surprised? Look, like the Liberian penal law, section 12.50 to 12.53 talks about all of these. These are not American laws. These are Liberian laws.
Yeah.
Where section 12.50 talking about the act of bribery, selling and buying public office, trading public office, receiving and giving bribes. These things are not enforced because it is the executive, the head of the government that lay a chokehold on how these institutions should function. If Liberia mean well, if the government mean well, leave the Minister of Justice alone to investigate. Leave the LACC alone to investigate.
All right.
Why is Mr. Wolokoli, Sumara Wolokoli, who is Deputy Minister of Finance, I guess for Revenue, who says he has companies that are doing business with the government, why is he not being investigated? Why is it the Director Brown alone?
No, I think that is a great question, and I think that will actually maybe segue us into taking comments. And so I think we should take a break now, and then after that we come back, then we'll go into the comments, and then we go into the rest of the I think the second half of the show. So please, Dennis, I think we should take a break because we're at the hour mark. If we can go take a break, and then after that we go into the comments. Okay.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jar.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome to Focus on Liberia, the marketplace where we talk everything finance and economics. Our topic today is corruption and the Magnistky Act. As we know, the OFAC just issued a report, indicted Senator Brent Johnson on that report as paying to play. So we're talking about that. We'll have Councillor Jewett with us and my co-host Alex. I think he's probably in the back there. So that's what we've been talking about today. And I think they were both able to share lights from it, looking at it from a corruption standpoint and also the financial implication in terms of the anti-money laundering and what it could mean. I think usually when this thing when it came out, we were looking at it. Oh, this guy, he shouldn't have been in power. First of all, well, it's true in as much that he was on the list. But one thing I keep hearing, I think we should be aware of is that this report is an indictment on the entire government of Liberia, and it's indictment on all of us, our consciousness, and how we look at Liberia, and how it kind of threatens our democracy, if you will. So this is what we're looking at today, and we're talking about that today. I think this second part of the show, we're about to go into comments. If you have any comments, please keep them coming. We'll go into we'll take comments, and then after that, we'll go into the second part of the show. This is what is this? Is it sorry? This is Emmanuel. He said, Councillor Jawe, is it possible to link human rights abuses in Liberia with the transfer of millions of government money by warlords and those who participated in those interim government in Liberia in the 1990s? Also, a few years ago, a Liberian who graduated from the Chicago School of Business, Chicago Booth, was hosted on the Rainbow Coalition show, moderated by Reverend Jesse Jackson in 2003, before Taylor was removed from the office, discussing about billions of Liberian assets stuck in the World Bank account. So let's I think we should take notes of the comments, and then after that we can answer them one at a time. It's another comment from Emmanuel Tia, or how you say it. Sorry if I pronounce your name right. Tia, okay. Please discuss Ben Ure too. Actually, I think that's one individual we missed.
But we're discussing the Magnistky Act now, so
we're talking the Magnistky Act, but I think we should drag him in there as well. This is from the CEO of Focus on Liberia. Dennis said, in the Vonnie Sherman case, do we know if the banks, the FIU, or government of Liberia did anything? I think that is a powerful question. I think you guys should take note of this question. Take note of this question. This can give us.
Do we know if the banks, the FIU, or the
government of Liberia did anything?
This can give us
an idea what is doable in the Prince Johnson case. I think you guys should take note of this. Any more comments? Dave Jad said, as long Prince Johnson is supporting WIA, he will be protected. As Brownie Samuka, asked Brownie Sumaka if he had run on the CDC ticket, it would have been different for him, I guess. Humphrey, is it Jabate? I think I got that right.
Yeah, Humphrey is talking about statute of limitation on prosecution.
I actually meant there is no status of limitation on prosecuting PYJ.
Should be
for pay to
statute.
play, P2P, right?
There's a statute of
It's
limitation.
Statute of
That's what he meant.
limitation, right? That's what he meant, right? If it didn't happen, if it didn't happen in Ellen Johnson government, it can happen now. It can happen now. I think that was a question. Joe Mon. Okay, this question is from Joe. The American are being hypocritical sanctioning PYJ for pay to play, which is commonplace in American politics. I think you can, if you punch me too, I got to punch you too, right? The concept of lobbying is a pervasive in the American Congress. Lobbying, by definition, is pay to play. Now, if the U.S. government accuses PYJ of crimes against humanity and human rights violation, that would make more sense. Yeah. Any more? Willie, thank you for the comment. I know you used to be part of us on this show, but thank you for the comment. The minister owning a business that partakes in government contracts of which he has influence is not money laundering, but rather a conflict of interest and a form of corruption. That is absolutely right. Correct. Yeah. Any more? If not, then we'll just go to Willie again. Said money laundering is the act of taking funds from an illicit means and using the financial system or means to make it appear legal. Once it is done, it gives the illicit actor or business the facade of legitimacy. Yeah, that's technically the legal definition of money laundering. Yeah. So, Counselor, there was a question by Dennis, and I think we may have touched on a little bit on that, but I think he expanded on some of the things as well, which could be like a baseline for. Could we have that comment back on there from Dennis? I don't think I remember it.
Dennis' question speaks to.
Do you remember? Okay.
Vis-a-vis Vanish Sherman, whether the FIU, the government of Liberia, and he mentioned another institution.
Voila. Voila. It's here. So
I would take a shot at this question very carefully.
All right. So while you take a careful shot at it, I want Councilor Jawed to also do that as well when you take a shot. So I will give both of you maybe a minute and a half to elaborate on that, comment on that.
So in Vanish Sherman's case, there was a big case that had to do with an American company.
Mm-hmm.
So that related to American funding directly, American funding, and the issue of a certain amount of money being used by a law firm or by an individual to quote unquote, and I'm using quote unquote again very carefully, to quote unquote give it to or bribe lawmakers to influence the procurement law that will favor these American companies.
Mm-hmm.
There are some in money laundering. There's something we call the VGOs, the domestic non-financial, designated non-financial businesses and professional. We call it DNFBs.
Right.
Law firms, accounting firms are some of them, right? Casinos are some of them.
Mm-hmm.
People can pass funnel money through these entities, right? So, for example, you can send chunk of money to a law firm to execute certain things for you, which as a means of shielding the original source of that. So, for an American company to send American monies to influence a situation in Liberia, in a nutshell, that is what, and this kid was in court. There are And to answer Dennis' question, there's a lot the government could have done even before the sanction, but there are certain things that did not happen. So the government, the U.S. government decided to utilize the things that the FIU could have done. Yes, there are plenty of things the FIU could have done. All right. So the U.S. government, once again, because this related to utilization of U.S. funding to influence a situation in Liberia, which the U.S. believed that it was a trip on their economic interest, they decided to issue the sanction through Treasury. And for the fact that Councillor Sherman have properties here, they confiscated. Can the banks do something? Yes, the banks listed that. But mind you now, you know that case went to court, right? And it went to court during the Ellen government, but during the Weah government, Councillor Sherman was acquitted, right?
Yeah.
So, it tied the hands of banks and other institutions, hands in their back. But the fact that given the international system and the laws of Liberia, the fact that your name show on OFAC list, yes, the same thing we talked about earlier, the same actions that the banks can take the action.
Yeah. Councillor,
I hope I answered the question without talking plenty.
No, that was great. I think that was below less than a minute and a half. So, Councillor, could you? I want to hear your take on that question as well. That could the government of Liberia, the FIU, could they have done anything in Vonnie Sherman's case that could have given them the basis for this current OFAC report that listed Prince Johnson?
In Liberia, the government of Liberia would normally, if it is in its political interest, specify prosecutorial individuals, people who could be prosecuted, specify them and not prosecute them. There are many ways indictments can be drawn. And if you are a very smart and focused criminal lawyer, you'll find out that an indictment can be drawn and leaving out what the lawyer will refer to as the prima facie evidence, or the first grade of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
I pity the banks. I would pity the FIU, the director and people who run it. The reason for that is that it is difficult to have the institution function effectively when the involvement of the executive becomes questionable. Very difficult. And if you want to be a director of FIU who is very active, able to ensure that the law is enforced, you will not last. You will be either required to resign or you will be made to get out. You will be thrown out of there. To answer the question clearly, there is no record that the government has done anything effectively to ensure that what has happened in the Prince Johnson case, if you compare it to Councillor Vonnie Sherman, it would not have happened. In fact, Councillor Sherman today is the chairman on judiciary. In other words, he helps the Senate to write the laws.
Jesus.
Councillor Sherman is very powerful. He advises maybe he had little leverage with Mr. Salif at some point. He advises and helped to write the laws for the Senate.
Can you imagine?
And he is referred to as a major legal mind in the Senate. Everybody looked to him for direction. There was a situation, there was a company that the Liberian government was to, I forgot the name of the company, but the Liberian government was entering into a concession agreement.
Yeah.
Councillor Sherman is a vice president in that company. And the government of Liberia consulted him to write the laws, the concession agreement. The legal advisor to President Weah, Mr. Bernard, Ajay Bernard, was the one that read that portion of the concession agreement that was not favorable to the government and people of Liberia.
Yeah.
Written by Councillor Vani Sherman as an advisor to the government of Liberia on legal matters, as well as the vice president in that company. So the government, the U.S. government came out clearly when Councillor Sherman was re-elected as chairman of the Judicial Committee. The U.S. government embassy came out and said, we don't want him, in simple Liberian English.
Yes.
This guy is so bad that we don't want him. And queried the Senate. What did the Senate do? They said, you cannot interfere in our business here. This is the Liberian Senate.
You know, this is something we've always done. We've always done this. Whether you want to go back into, and I usually tell people this.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Let me. I know you added me to that thing, but let me take a jab at some of the questions that are listed.
No. Let me land, and I'll let you come in. This is something we've always done, right? Whether you want to look back at in a way, they're right. We're a sovereign nation. You know, the U.S. can only meddle into our democracy and politics to a certain extent. But I think the onus is upon us, whether in the Senate and the people of Liberia, to know that it's just common sense that somebody who was put on that list should not be heading a Senate Judiciary Committee. Like that is, and he went as far as being as a vice president on a company that is doing business with the government. That's basic conflict of interest, you know. So some of these things, in as much that we can keep foreigners out or foreign governments out to say the U.S. and to not meddle into our business, these are self-inflicted wounds that we impose on ourselves that perpetuates some of the gross negligence of how we manage our country and our economy that's continuing today. So I absolutely agree with you. Alex, yes, please do come in.
Yes, so let me just the ones I have here. Let me just one of the comments talk about statute of limitations, right? So from the context of what I know of the anti-money laundering laws and the anti-terrorism laws in Liberia, yes, there is statute of limitation on certain things. So even on the corruption side, for example, if the Auditor General, the GSC, the General Auditing Commission, conducts an audit, and then the Auditor General signs off in submission, right, of that audit report. From the day the Auditor General signed, I think there's if I'm not mistaken, there's a 5-year window for action to be taken for that case, either anything, because the Auditor General writes it, they send it to the legislature, will copy it to the president. The legislature have their legislative hearing and their committee of the legislature that takes care of. It's an entity of the legislature that takes care of all that. So all that work should be done to the point where if there's reason for them to indict somebody, to carry somebody to court, that I mean, the other people don't indict people. People always miss it. Sometimes after all that legislative hearing, sometimes you can pay the money back, you can without. There sometimes you broke some law, the president can take action. The president could slap your hand, the president could warn you, the president could could suspend you, the president could dismiss you. Some of the cases require going to court. So if you go to court, then, but if you don't act within that 5-year period after the Auditor General signed, then the statute of limitation takes effect. And we have a case, a stare decisis of, I don't remember the case, but certain individuals were acquitted on account of statute of limitation. Even though they appear to, if they are really not because of the statute of limitation, they would have been pleaded and they would have been brought down guilty. But because their lawyers went into that statute of limitation thing, they were acquitted on that.
It's a bank. I think it's a former governance.
It was a case in Liberia. I forgot that case, right?
So
yes, there are statute of limitation, but there are some things like on terrorism, certain serious crime on terrorism. There's no statute of limitation. 20 years ago, they would still bring that case in the targeted sanction against terrorist act and terrorist individual law. There's no statute of limitation. So there are some laws that there's no statute of limitation, but yes, statute of limitation apply in Liberia. The other one is this whole this thing being hypocritical, and there is lobbying like in America and blah, 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 but it's say in the case of Prince Johnson, is it lobbying? Is there a lobbying firm?
It's not lobbying, no.
Recently, the Liberian government paid somebody, Bakari Salos, to lobby on their behalf. That's legal.
Yep.
A lobbying firm can be paid. That is legal. But in Prince Johnson's case, it's not lobbying. There's not a firm that he operates that people pay money for to lobby. It's different. So will you call Vanisha Ma'un lobbying as well? No. So there's a thin line between these things. So we should, if you say, okay, why is the American government going beyond Prince Johnson alone and not the other institution? I would say, yeah, well, maybe because Prince Johnson poses the most risks to them. But these other people maybe put their risk is not because they raise, they get high, they get high, medium, they get medium, they get like that. So when it falls in certain categories, then they go after you. Even though you are in the grand scheme of things, but if your risk is low, then they don't go after you yet. They might go after you maybe years after, but they don't go after you yet. Now, let's talk about the case. Let me talk about let me answer the question of the deputy minister situation, like they alluded to. Okay. And somebody clearly said it. I don't remember the person's name, but the person defined it is, look, the way I will answer that question, if you ascend to certain position, you become, especially when you're appointed, you become a politically exposed person. You are occupying a significant public office. So you wield influence. So there is something they call conflict of interest. There is something they call abuse or misuse of office. There is something they call influence peddling. So there's a thin line of you having a company as a second income and the fact that you occupy a public office, a significant public office. Because the fact that you are a minister, you are a director, people scare you already. People want favor from you. So people will do things for you. That alone is giving. So you can, even your spouse, even your children, that's why they classify them as PEP as per our laws. And there's a list. The LSCC and the FIU did that comparison. And the list agrees of people that are listed. That's why you're supposed to declare your asset, right? And when your assets are declared, the companies you own shares in. Certain position, you are not supposed to own shares in certain company. Like if you are FIU, you can own share in bank, any financial institution. Any attempt to own share in bank or to serve on the board of director of a bank, you can be dismissed. That's break of the law. So we got to be careful. That is why in certain position, the first thing you do, you write a note declaring what we call conflict of interest. And that conflict of interest could mean, okay, I have interest in this company, I have this company running, I have that company running. You remember our Auditor General, what's his name, Robert Kirby, was fired by the president for similar act because he had a company that he started a contract at General Services, GMP. And when that came to light, that was used to fire him. Even though he gave other excuses, what he should have done in that case was declare a conflict of interest and recuse himself the moment he became Auditor General. The moment he was appointed as Auditor General, he read his conflict of interest and excused himself for the company, either resign from the company or do something.
So why couldn't this deputy minister do the same?
But remind you now, they get something they call also they get something they call beneficial ownership. Because you resign the company, but you stay receiving money from the company behind the scene, you stay the ultimate beneficial ownership. So these things are wrapped around you. Right? So what typically you do is to declare your conflict of interest and withdraw yourself from the company and let other people run with it. Now, if you're a sole owner of the company, to the extent that you disband the company. Me personally, I did the same thing when I became this Alan Bernard, you see, so when I became head of the FIU, I shut it down. I had a contract rolling with one of the ministries. And the minister was so surprised. I told her, as soon as they appointed me, as soon as I saw my appointment, I said, Madam Minister, I cannot continue on this project. She said, why? What can I make? The other guy was laughing at me. What can I make? You leaving money on the table?
That's how it should be. That's how it should be.
Interest. Because even though it's a World Bank project, but the money coming through the Ministry of Finance, through the PMU. So my check is coming from the Ministry of Finance.
Yeah.
So I cannot be receiving another salary from the Ministry of Finance and receiving money from this project. But even if the money was not coming through the Ministry of Finance, if the money was coming directly from the World Bank, it's a government influence job. Mm-hmm. So I recuse myself right away from the contract.
I think they should mandate people to do that.
I recuse myself. One of her names actually from Bassa, she was the former minister of gender, the former minister of gender.
Oh, what a woman!
She's not living with me. I told her I'm not continuing this job.
Mm-hmm.
They made May 14, 2014 when I was appointed. I told her I'm done. She said, "Oh, people, you can't continue it here. Okay, we'll not pay you." And we went back. I said, No. This is conflict of interest. I'm not continuing. I recuse myself. To the extent I could help you to find a replacement, I can help the procurement process to look at
Julia Duncan.
Yeah, Julia Duncan can say. Ask Julia Duncan can say she's my witness. She's my living witness. Julia Duncan can say, I told her I'm not continuing the job. And to the extent that I canceled my company, I disbanded my company right away, delisted my company, deregistered it, closed the office down, moved the asset to my house, closed down. So when you are in a certain position, there are certain things you can do. They're thin line. You may want to say, okay, I say shut the company down. The company can continue, but to the extent that you can do, or if they're doing other private sector jobs,
focus on the private sector job, right?
So it's a thin line, So they are setting, and then we have the Code of Conduct Act, to which some of these things are enshrined inside, even though it leaves much to be desired, but some of these things are enshrined inside. So it becomes a delicate situation.
I think the thing we struggle with, it's even though it may be legal, but it may not be ethical, right? In as much that he could say, you know what, I'm not doing any business with the government. There's no need for me to shut down this company. Yeah, that is legal. But from an ethical standpoint, it's not ethical, So if you were looking at it from an ethical standpoint, you'll say, hey, even though this is legal, but the fact that I'm engaged in the government, I should recuse myself. Either as you in your case, what you did, you should not only stop doing business with certain individual, but you also shut down your company. You could have said, you know what, I'm going to stop doing business with these people, but still keep the company active, but in reality, but from an ethic, I think you went as far to look at it from an ethical standpoint, to even delist our company, shut it down. That's the right thing we should do, and those are things that we should be doing regardless, and not only expect people to do them, but
it
let
helped
me
me.
let me give you an example here, right?
My company that helped me, I lose money.
let me give you an example here. So, if you working in a big bank, right? Some of the big banks, I would name one, Bank of America, right? The moment you get hired there, they first thing they make you do, you have to reveal every account you have, every bank account you have. There's a division in there, right? That monitor it. So the first thing they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. They'll tell you to say, Alex, they give you a form, list any account you have, any investment account, any deposit account, savings account, whatever, monitor it, list it and give it to us, right? And they will ask you, is this all you have, right? Because they want to monitor those accounts. You give it to them, they will monitor it. They monitor it. They don't just give you the benefit of the doubt. I think this is something we can do in the government as well. Instead of giving people the benefit of the doubt to say, hey, we think these are ethical people who put it in power, they will do the right thing. You have to mandate and enforce it as well to make sure that people are not engaged in this type of things. You can put checks and balance in place, but if you're not checking those balances that you put in place, people will, we're humans. People will circumvent those things and continue engaging in this type of thing. Like, the deputy minister of finance, the fact that he was even emboldened to come on social media to talk, and defend that kind of business dealing was troubling, and nobody's talking about these things. These are things that should be troubling us. This is somebody who is second in command as the minister of finance, right? So in as much that we can look at it to say we expect these people to do this thing, we should be putting checks and balance in place to check those things to make sure people are held accountable and doing those right things. And if they're found, like in his case, we don't have to go any further. We can just investigate him and maybe have him replaced. But is that going to happen?
Let me give a caveat here, because my statements was brought up in perspective. Because in the case of the deputy minister, I'm not aware of the particular. I don't have the information as to. I only heard it on what do you call it, the spoon. I do not have particular details. But I was not speaking on his case specifically. What I was speaking,
I'm not speaking on his case. I didn't.
The general situation, what people in those positions should do.
Right.
That's why I gave my specific example, what I did.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But generally, like I said, there's a thin line between these things. So you have a company, you might continue running the company to the extent that it has no interference, no government contract, nothing to influence. You can influence. Maybe it's solely in the private sector or it's international contract you are doing. But again, there's a thin line. So that's why for me, when I begin the head of the FIU, because of the kind of institution it is,
right,
I cut it off.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want any semblance of problem. I just cut it off.
Yeah.
I was just teaching to my LU and do my because it's provided that you can also provide education. So I was just teaching the LU and working to my FIU. That was all I was doing.
So I want to speak a little bit on the issue of statute of limitation. Yes, under the Liberian law, there are certain cases that must be prosecuted within the space of 5 years after it is discovered that fraud or other malpractices have occurred. And there was a question of whether the war laws, economic empowerment they got as a result of the war is the limitation. If you were to follow the Liberian law, and that's why most of the authority in the Liberian government or government in totality in Liberia is a place for people to get rich by stealing. Again, I'll go back to the budget. The budget is written in a fine way, but you need to look at the items. Where are the appropriations?
Yeah.
And sometimes what the government will do is that, knowing that there is statute of limitation in certain cases, the government will just sit and don't do anything until when you indict a person. I think the former governor, deputy governors, and Weeks and other people were taken to court. And one of the things the defense counsel had to do, knowing fully well that the time for prosecution has come and passed,
Has lapsed,
he
right?
filed a motion to dismiss on ground that government has sat on his hands, and that though the defendant might have committed a crime as charged, but the statute barred the Liberian government from moving forward. And in such cases, when you rely upon the Liberian law with all of those catches of hoax and glitches and so forth, you'll find that prosecution itself under the Liberian law may not be possible. Like the warlords who stole money during the war, who broke banks and were able to carry some money at their homes, were able to bring it back into the bank and deposit it into the bank and doing certain business. Under the Liberian law, the statute of limitation prevent them.
Right.
But is there a statute of limitation if it involves money laundering? No. Because if the judiciary, I would say, want to be progressive enough, you would look at the Liberian law and interpret the law as it said, but you would then say, however, there are international provisions.
Yes.
Which backed people acquiring wealth in the way they acquire it and rule thereto. The recent thing with I think it was LACC, something like that, where the LACC deputy director in the Freeport case said I think had 10 or 15% share in a company that was created, where the company was receiving contract from the Freeport or from the ports of Liberia. And his sister, he said, I'm not corrupt because I only named my sister as a holder in what you call it, as a shareholder, not me. But he, as a lawyer, is the one who worked in negotiating to ensure that his sister had 10% or 15% share in it.
Yeah.
The thing is, we have very good laws. The problem we have is that our laws are influenced, are interfered with by the executive branch of government. It becomes so much so that it's difficult to ensure that these institutions, fine institutions that we are established, it becomes difficult to run them because you are at the hope and pleasure of the executive.
No, thank you. Is this Verdier? Sorry, I think we're expecting you on the show, but we're about to wrap up. I know you came in. Yeah, you came in so late.
Verdier came in to give a closing comment.
Yeah. So I my last question I want to pose, and I think you guys can use that as your closing. In response to that, you can use your closing statement to answer that. Maybe take a minute to answer that. What do you guys think will be the implication of this report on the 2023 election? With that, I think
we can give Verdier some time to put some things in context or perspective from his.
Yes. Sorry, I was trying to look at our time here. Welcome. My name is Gabriel. This is probably my first time meeting you. I'm sure you're aware of the topic we're talking about today, corruption and the Magnistky Act. So we're looking at the corruption standpoint, and we're also looking at the financial implication, from an anti-money laundering standpoint. I may not know your background, but I will let you to maybe share some lights on the report itself, the sanction report that came out against Prince Johnson, and what is your take on that?
Thank you very much. Let me just first express.
First, introduce yourself, please, if you will. Right.
My name is James Verdier Jr.
Yeah.
Let me express my apologies for this late entry. I had indicated to the person who sent me the invite
Yeah.
that I will be very busy.
Yeah.
And it will be difficult for me to, but at any point in time, I will probably want to chime in. And this is just the opportunity I had. So I
No,
regret
that's
it's
okay.
late,
Thank you for joining us.
but yeah, and I don't know what the comments that have been made, but I would just briefly say, relative to the Magnitsky Act and the actions just recently announced against Senator Prince Johnson, regarding sanctions being imposed due to his work behavior in Liberia. You see, imposing sanction is one thing. I am always the person who says that Liberians actually should be able to do for themselves what they look to the international community to do.
Yes.
The Magnitsky Act will be, and the sanctions will be as effective as the Liberians want it to be and neighboring countries want it to be. Basically, it's preventing Prince Johnson from accessing U.S. territory and resources if he has in the U.S. and travel to the U.S. and all of that. That's a good first step. But I believe that all of the things we want to achieve in terms of penalizing the likes of Prince Johnson, that Liberians and Liberian lawmakers, Liberian political leaders, the executive branch of government have all of the power to do those things. Those sanctions can be imposed on Prince Johnson right there. We can effectively prosecute people of the likes of Prince Johnson right in Liberia. We do not need to look out to international community to do those things. Now, in terms of corruption, what this does is certainly has brought to light again. It has highlighted some of the negatives, some of the vices of corruption and how corruption tends to stifle our nation in terms of economic development. And there are a lot more persons than Prince Johnson who should also be sanctioned as well. But again, I just always come back. This is the strongest point I have. I think the steps that the U.S. government is taking, because the Magnitsky Act has a global effect. Actually started to sanction Russian leaders for the way they actually got rid of a Russian activist.
Yeah.
Then they extended it globally. So now they have extended it, and it's a good thing to actually prevent people who cause all of these harm and injury in their country from traveling to the U.S. and accessing bank accounts that they established. But my thing is, what prevents the Liberian judicial system, the Liberian justice system, from issuing and for enforcing something like that on Prince Johnson? Look, the TRC has documented reports regarding Prince Johnson's activities and what he did, the atrocity he caused, and other people. Our justice system, even without getting a war crimes tribunal in Liberia, our justice system can institute measures to prosecute people who, committed those things. And that's, for me, that's what I come from. I think the government does not have the guts, and it's not just this government. You know what I'm saying? The previous government who have also done something. We need to muster the courage to say, look, we have enough documentation on people who committed war crimes in Liberia. What happened to our justice system? Our laws, like I just heard Councilor Jay was saying, and I'm sorry I didn't greet you guys, man. Let me express my
no, continue. We're enjoying the conversation.
We also apologize and we introduce you after you finish. We introduce you.
Just continue when you wrap up. I'll let
this is basically my concern. I think it's about time that we bring enough pressure. I'm talking about the Liberian people to bear on our government to take action, to instruct the Attorney General of Liberia to initiate processes that will begin to prosecute people who are being accused of war crimes in Liberia, and then we can ask the international community for support, where we lie. But our laws are strong enough to begin to institute this kind of processes. I think that's where we should begin from.
No, thank you. That was man. That was brilliant.
We like to apologize to our viewers. Councillor James Verdier, not Jerome, but James Verdier. That's why he called J. Nipan Verdier Jr. was scheduled on this program, but coincidentally, he had a funeral to be at this point, which he could not, that's why you see him dressed in the way he dressed. So I just chatted with him. He asked if we are on, we stay on, and I said yes, and he came on.
Yeah.
So James is the former head of the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission. So that's why we invited him to this program to give us some context on some of this stuff. But unfortunately, because of his engagement. He just agreed that I would chime in at a point. So once he chatted with me, I said, yes, we are on. He took the horn on, but we appreciate within all the circumstances he had at the moment to just come in to show his face.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, James, my good friend.
That's why it's about just to show my face. Yeah.
No, thank you.
You have to answer present.
Councilor, how are you?
I'm okay, Councilor Joel. It's been a long time.
Yeah, man. We're in and out. We're here.
Yeah.
Thank God.
No, thank you. Thank you. I think that was you know, a more elaborate approach to you know, take on what we were talking about here. I think for the sake, I mean, we would love to have you here. We, you know, on other shows, you know, as I said, on the Focus on Liberia, especially on the marketplace, we talk everything that has to do with finance, economics, and money and business in between. But we also, you know, in this case where we talk about corruption and the Magnistky Act, even if you want to join us on any of the our future discussion, you are more than welcome to you have Alex contact. Please reach out to him, say, hey, whatever you guys talking about, I'd like to come onto the remote. You're more than welcome to join us. It was unfortunate that you couldn't chime in for the rest of the discussion, but you know, we still thank you for taking your time to come on. I know we're so far pressed for time, but the last question that I want to ask here, which I think I want every one of you guys to maybe use it as your closing statement. It might be a mouthful, but you know, with this whole Magnistky Act and the you know, its implication, whether on corruption, on our banking sector, or democracy, what do you guys think will be the implication of this report on the upcoming election in 2023? How do you think this is? Because the reason why I'm asking this question, because we know, I think Councillor Jewel actually pointed out, Prince Johnson has been like this kingpin maker in influencing some of our elections. I think this report came out to you know, put a blow in some of that his power in future scenarios. So my next question here, which I think you guys should use as your closing statement, is what do you think this implication will be in the upcoming election in 2023? This whole report of him being sanctioned, and which actually, I think in a way takes his power away to becoming that playmaker in Liberia politics.
Let me tell you what I have heard.
Yeah.
I've heard that the people of Nima County who vote in mass for the Weah government, for President Weah to win the election, because it is like an abuse or an interference into what Nima has been doing or what Nima has done to support the presidency of Liberia. And so they will vote angrily that, and Prince Johnson having said that he will be with Mr. Weah until he dies, they will vote for the Weah government. Politically and internationally, I'm sure anyone who have heard that Prince Johnson is sanctioned would do very well to take good distance away from him.
Yep.
Even if he won as a result of some angry voting people from Nima, and I didn't get that from key Nima people, I got them from people who thought that this is what Nima would do. You will also be careful because the U.S. is a big player. The U.S. has finances that could help Liberia development. They could just say that, like they said in the Prince Johnson case, we will not work with him. If you made him chair of defense intelligence and what have you, we just would not work with him. And so maybe Mr. Weah would choose to stay away from him and try to say you should stay out of the light for the sake of Liberia. I think the opposition who might have been thinking that Prince Johnson may be unfair, not supporting them, may be also careful to stay away from him. Everybody may try to, stay away from him with the hope that they will not anger Uncle Sam.
Okay. Thank you. Alex, could you maybe give
I
your?
think I'd like to let
Okay.
Virgil.
I was trying to let him go last since he was yeah. But are you a counselor as well?
Yeah, he's a.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is that Verdiet? Is that how you say your last name? Verdiet?
Yeah, I thought you had my brother on your show a couple of times.
Yeah.
So the way you pronounce his name is the
Okay.
same.
Okay.
Jerome is
Verdiet.
my brother. We
Ah.
are brothers from both mine and pa. So if
Okay.
you pronounce his name right, then you can pronounce my name right as
No,
well.
I'm very cautious about pronouncing people's name because sometimes,
Yeah.
you
So the
get it
name
wrong, people get
is
offended.
James Impam Freddie Jr.
Okay.
But thank you. Like you said, yeah, I do look forward to another opportunity. I think we can have an opportunity where we share much more, longer and broader perspective on whatever discussion, if corruption, human rights, or whatever. I
Yeah.
would look forward to doing that. But my views
Perfect.
on your last question is not much different from what Councilor Jerry has already said. So I'm not going to spend my time repeating what he said, but I do agree that some political figures and a lot of stakeholders in Liberia who had seen Prince Johnson as a power broker, in NIMBA or in the Liberian body politic for that matter, we begin to take a step back from him because they may not want to be entrapped, as they don't. But what direct impact is going to have on the Liberian body politic in terms of 2023? Personally, and that's my impression. Personally, I think very little because there are not much the Liberian people who are going to go to for the electorates. Well, they may not even be looking at what Prince Johnson did because they've done it over and over and again. I think it has a broader international sanction and perspective and take back from Prince Johnson in terms of his ability to come outside of Liberia, deal with other stakeholders, and be very effective and be respected. I think it takes that, and then I think it's going to disconnect his contacts in terms of international, relations and all of that. So he's going to be somebody who is basically, I understand he's right now with the situation with what's happening. He's also very frightened to travel. He doesn't know what could be at stake, for him. So
Yeah.
it puts a strain on him. So that in that way is effective because it's going to keep him nation bound. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So he's going to be there instead of the person who travels all around. And that's one reason because it creates a psychological fear on him as well because he doesn't know what the U.S. government is planning. And I think it will even do much more better things for Liberia if the Liberian government can also act on other cases of corruption and
Thank you.
other cases involved, so that
Yeah.
the international community is even encouraged
Yeah.
to go a step further. Because I've heard a lot of people calling on the U.S. government to do the same with other people. But what is the Liberian government doing? To reinforce what the U.S. government is trying to do. We need to take some action because our laws actually provides the opportunity for us to actually take the kind of action against people who are cause harm and mayhem against our people. And Prince Johnson's case have lingered for a long, long time. We're just not able to take the bull by the horn. So in terms of the direct impact on Liberian politics in 2023, if Prince Johnson has declared, that he's going to stay with President Weah, I think more likely than not, the NIMA people are beginning to look at Prince Johnson with a different lens. I think they have different lenses right now. I think the influence that he has enjoyed over the years, I think that influence has diminished a bit because of his inability to. And then besides that, he's a very, very unstable person.
Very.
So I think they're going to begin to look at him in different ways. But again, I just hate to repeat this. We need to take an action against Prince Johnson and people of his life to say, look, Liberian government we have this report and we take some action against this report or in favor of this report, and let's begin to do something. So I really don't think there will want to be a massive turnaround from Prince Johnson. I think the people in the United States support and respect Prince Johnson for whatever reason. I really don't understand, and that's something we need to look at in the really generally and see what do we do to skew these people away from supporting a man who has been termed and been seen as a murderer, as a as a human rights violator, as well as a war crime accused. So we need to take the bull by the horn. But for me, Councilor Joey, I really think in terms of amassing that Nima County vote, I think there are a lot of people from Nima County who are going to troop behind Prince Johnson if he stands for election. Whether he can't be elected, but he still wields a lot of influence, and that's something we need to do. And it's not by getting angry with the people of Nima, it's by actually talking to them, counseling them, exposing the atrocity and the harm that Prince Johnson involvement in Liberian politics have done to Liberia. To continue to do it has smeared our international reputation and all of that. So we need to let them understand this kind of thing. There are not many of the people in Nimakande, in Liberia for that matter, who are reading the Magnistky Act, who know what the Magnistky Act is. So we need a lot of education for them to be able to do that. So actually, I think it's going to be very late in terms of the impact it will have, on those 2023 elections.
No, I think you and I, we share the same view in terms of, in as much as that is out there, we ourselves have to do something as a country before we can look to this whole global Magnitsky Act. We have to do something ourselves. So I share. I think both of you, the opinion as well. Alex, what are you there? You listening to us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can we hear your take on that?
Yeah,
I know you tend to walk a fine line here, so I'll let you do that, please. What do you think? What do you think this whole Magnitsky Act and OFAC sanction on Prince Johnson will have on the upcoming election, knowing who he is, who he was, who he has been in terms of politics in Liberia, and what are the implications comes 2020?
Yeah, well, I mean, to talk about Prince Johnson as a person, I would talk about Prince Johnson politically, right? And politically, Prince Johnson has been a kingmaker in the body politics. From my own analysis, engaging politics as well in Liberia, I thought that Prince Johnson played a pivotal role in determining the result of some of the elections in the past, and especially the 2017 elections. His involvement in those elections, and depends on which side he went, kind of decided when I did my own analysis, his moving towards a particular candidate swayed certain things to that person's advantage. So he plays a critical role in the body politics of Liberia. And to do that, again, with this pay-to-play thing is coming about, because the politics is such that, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. So you want me to go on this side, to throw my weight on this side, you got to scratch my back in order for me to bring my back on this side. So, and because we're pressed for time, I wouldn't say too long, but what I would say is Prince Johnson play a pivotal role in the Liberian politics. Now, what I will end with is that the sanctions has come. Then other situations have been, talked about. And if you read that sanction document, you read it carefully. And all I can say is govern yourself accordingly. Read that sanction document carefully. And I stop there.
No, thank you. Thank you for that, and thank all of you for the the comments and your opinion on this.
We'll be glad to have Mr. Councilor Verdier back.
Yes, but not just him, both of you. I think we did you well. It was actually because you were engaged in other things, but we would love to have both of you back on future shows. So, as I said earlier, the line is always open. You can reach out to Alex or Dennis.
We'll
And I
reach out,
think
we'll
if
reach out to him when
we
have
will
the
reach out to you guys, yes, if we have
Okay.
something coming up. But I think I would really value your opinions and that you shared on this topic today. I think for the sake of time, that brings us to our closing. And for me, as I said earlier, I shared the opinion that you guys have, that in as much that we have this whole Magnitsky Act that is coming and looking at one person, not only is an indictment on all of us, but it has a global implication into our country. But also, I think, as Councillor right here pointed out, is that Liberia, the government of Liberia, and I think Councillor Chewa mentioned that as well. As a country, we have to do something. We can't just keep looking at, oh, the big brothers say this, so we got to do what the big brothers say. But we ourselves have to craft the Liberia that we want to see in terms of holding these kind of people accountable. Prince Johnson been, like you guys pointed out, he been lingering under the surface for far so long, and then boom, this report come out. Then all of a sudden we want to take him and hang him, put his head on a guillotine, right? We have to do something, right? We have, as a country, we have to be able to hold these kind of people accountable, that so they don't appear on these kind of report anymore. But even if they do appear, that we already have them in our in the headlight to say, hey, we've been looking at this individual. It's glad that you guys point these things out. We're also doing what we can to rectify the situation. But in actuality, this is an indictment on all of us, not just Prince Johnson, because everything that happened in our report and how we handle it going forward, it affects Liberia and Liberians as a whole. So that is my take on that. If you guys don't have anything else to say, I think I need to wrap us up. Any last comment or no? No. Okay. Well, again, I want to say thank you guys for coming. This is Focus on Liberia, where we talk everything finance and economics and business as well. We do this every Saturday, 3:00, and for last Saturday, we actually, for the sake of time, we actually miscommunicated and they didn't appear on here. But, we will be here next Saturday at 3:00 as well, every Saturday going forward. For those of you in our Cyberverse, thank you for taking the time for joining us for, I think, about 2 hours. We enjoy your comments. Please, every time we're on here, bring your comments. We will try to answer every comment. If not, for the sake of time, we'll pass up on some. But again, thank you for coming, and thank you guys for joining us. We usually leave with a song that says, regardless of whether you want Prince Johnson to be held accountable by Liberian government or the Magnitsky Act, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you are, whether you're CDC, opposition, or regardless of what part of the economic spectrum you are, whether you're one of the select few or well, regardless of everything, we're all Liberian. And one thing that we can all hope for is that we want a better Liberian. So again, thank you guys for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you here next Saturday at 3:00. Thank you.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia.
We are